Hey, it's news from heaven. Evil spirits guilt trip us using our past. That might sound a little bit weird, but it's not as weird as it sounds. Because if you just heard that title, you might think, oh, we're talking about disembodied spirits that fly around and somehow can elicit thoughts and emotions and criticize you for past behaviors. But what we're really talking about is a mid-18th century Swedish scientist having perennial lucid experiences with spirits all around him and learning that's how consciousness actually works and recording his experiences about them influencing him and how that is an underlying condition that influences us all. But what I will say is that there is an equally strange, if you really dig down into it, overabundance of guilt trips happening. If you think about the amount of time where you have been on the receiving end of a mind that seems like it's interested in making you feel unnecessarily bad about something. Now, maybe you're not seeing it in yourself, but I would say you probably know somebody who you think, oh, if they would just lighten up on themselves and see how they're not as bad as they sound or as bad as they seem, they could really be free. Who gets paid to have somebody unnecessarily criticize himself? Why does it happen? And isn't it interesting, if we're going to talk about evil spirits and guilt tripping, you think evil spirits, they want you to do bad things, right? That's what evil wants. But there's this fascinating dynamic where actually evil is interested in finding and criticizing people for what they believe is evil. That good, love, doesn't find any pleasure in or any feeling of rightness in pointing out, look, you've done this wrong. I'm not saying you can't set boundaries and things, but this whole if I really notice what everyone else is doing wrong, it does not mean I'm such a good person. That's not how heaven and hell works, man. And this is going to be rough sailing because we're dropping right into the middle of Secrets of Heaven, right into the middle of where he's explaining this passage in the Bible and how that's a commentary on, this whole evil spirits thing in our mind. And we actually did the earlier part of this very number in a different News from Heaven episode, and I don't remember which one it is. I was going to refer you to it. It's one of them. So let's explore the second half here. Consequently, when outermost truth has been snatched away, and we therefore have no means of defending ourselves against earthly people, we come into spiritual crisis and find ourselves accused by evil spirits, all of whom are purely earthly. All right, get a blanket. Let's unpack this sentence. Because, well, first of all, we got this outermost truth getting snatched away, right? And that is somehow, so outermost truth would be like the, most exterior, still useful and important. Think of the skin, the role it plays versus the internal organs. It's useful, but it's maybe not as deep. That can be taken away because, again, the mind is spirit. So different spiritual processes can provide or withdraw sort of the resources we have there. You with me? Okay. We therefore have no means of defending ourselves against earthly people. So you think we're talking about we're going through some spiritual process, and you probably would think, oh, this is talking about when you're not really on your game mentally, and so your neighbor or your rival at work starts to come at you, and you can't really combat them. But then we're talking about we come into a spiritual crisis and find ourselves accused by evil spirits. Oh, we've jumped into spirits, all of whom are purely earthly. So these earthly people, at least here we're talking about as evil spirits. Because evil spirits are just superficial, self-centered people who now have died. They don't have a body, but they got a spirit. And guess what? They're still interested in doing things like accusing, in the joys of evil. The joys of evil include accusing. Okay, that wasn't too bad. I mean, we cut out the blanket, but it seems like I was maybe overhyping that a little bit. Now, listen, we're going to take a dive into what I feel like is it's a very clear example that Swedenborg gives, and we'll see if it resonates with us. But if not, and even if so, I think it explains or lays out a principle that definitely applies to all of us. One of their main charges, so if an evil spirit's trying to get you, what are they trying to say? is that we lie about what is good. Oh, and I don't know if I made this clear. Back here when we're talking about people who are having guilt trips in their head, Swedenborg was, and for those of you who've been watching this show for a while, you know this, it's no problem. For those of you who have not, here we go. So what Swedenborg was asserted is that, so he began having these spiritual experiences, right? Where he could do out-of-body stuff, right? He could go visit heaven and hell, but he also became aware of that the physical world and spiritual world are very closely intertwined. Sorry, I just found myself making that. Very closely intertwined. And actually that we inhabit both worlds. So we have a spirit and a body. And the things, Swedenborg became aware of spirits and became aware of them, how they were affecting him and how they were affecting his thoughts, how they were affecting his feelings. And it was very vivid and very overt. But he says the same thing is happening to all of us all the time, but we experience it in a muted way through thoughts and feelings. So we're having these guilt trips and things, these incessant thoughts, these attacks actually could well be, this is from hell. Everything's from heaven and hell. Don't get freaked out about that, because according to Swedenborg, like every good thought and feeling we have is from heaven. Every bad thought and feeling we have is coming from hell. So this is an interchange we're having all the time, just like the body. We're constantly eating food. We're constantly breathing in oxygen. You're always having an interchange with the physical environment around you. So it is mentally. You're having an interchange with the spiritual environment around you. Okay? So I just want to say we're all along for the ride here when we talk about what evil spirits are doing to Swedenborg is what the negative parts of our own psyche are doing to us. So what are they saying, though? They will say, for instance, okay, here we get a quote from Evil Spirit. You used to think and say that we should do good to our neighbor, and you proved it with your deeds. But now, by neighbor, you mean only people with goodness and truth, not people with evil and falsity who can't be reformed. You don't want to help the evil anymore. If you are going to help them, you want them punished for their own improvement and in order to head off any harm to your neighbor. That means, they charge, that you have thought and spoken falsely. Your thoughts are at odds with your words. And this is, I think, directly out of Swedenborg's life, because he did have this change, a huge change in belief system once he began having these spiritual experiences. He still found great value and use, and actually a clarification and clarity around the Christian framework that he had. It was greatly expanded in a way that I feel like harmonizes perfectly with all kinds of traditions and life experiences, and even the things we discover about the physical world. But things like, love your neighbor, that remained with him, but it changed, because something that Swedenborg describes going through is where initially he felt like, so to do charity, right? We'll see there. It's just, you're just helping in any way. You're just giving out. Maybe you're giving resources. Maybe you're giving assistance of some kind. Just anybody who's there, give them what they want, right? To give people what they want is charity. But once he had this sort of awakening here, he kind of came into the same sort of resolve that we now see around when people are dealing with someone who's struggling with an addiction, right? And we have this whole term which is called enabling, which is even though you could be giving this person what they want, if what they want actually doesn't tend towards their best good, that giving them more of the, not holding them accountable, not showing that tough love actually is going to be worse for them and worse for the other people if they're drinking and driving, and that's putting people at risk. So to just give to them what they want and think, oh, that's love, isn't love, because where it ends up is this pain that's here. Whereas if this person is in a state where, they would, if you gave them some kind of assistance, it would raise them up, that's when you help. So the way that you help people varies on the impact that it'll have on them. And this is something that now is pretty common, but I don't think was as developed back then. And it was certainly a shift for Swedenborg. But now this hell is coming and talking to him. These spirits are saying, look at you, you hypocrite. You either what you're doing now is false, or look at you. You used to do this same thing that now you say you shouldn't do. You're a liar, or you're a fraud, or something like that. So that's what Swedenborg was up against. That he was in some kind of state here where outermost truths were snatched away. Because you'd think, you read about He was constantly deflecting arguments of this kind. And we can, at times, when we're in our little mental world here, there's times when it seems like, negative thoughts and feelings don't really have much of a hold on us. You can deflect them. But isn't there times when you're already weak and stuff just gets to you and you just can't help it? Like, I just am struggling with feeling worthless, or like I'm nothing, or like I'm bad. And I don't have an answer for it. Whereas usually you do, an emotional answer or a mental answer or something, but we don't have it anymore. That's the state when these outermost truths are snatched away. Okay? So where does the story go from here? For another instance, when we become spiritual, we no longer consider it reverent and devout to give to monasteries or even to well-endowed churches. Before becoming spiritual, we did have the thought that it was reverent and devout, so the evil spirits accuse us of falsity. Okay, and this is, again, straight out of Swedenborg. When he was saying, he used to just think, based on his faith, that it's just good to give money to religious institutions. But here he's saying, no, I need to know the character of those institutions. I don't know if this is really going to help the world for me to give money to this church that has a bunch of money and isn't necessarily doing good things. So now, before becoming spiritual, we did not have the thought that it was reverent, and we did have the thought that it was reverent and devout. So the evil spirits accuse us of falsity. These examples may or may not have a lot of purchase on you. Let's say that you do have a background, a religious background or a Christian background, and you did feel like the things he's describing here are very important, but now you're wondering in the same way he is. It can, if you're still like moving through that, it can be you can doubt yourself. Whereas somebody who doesn't have any sort of background or lasting background with religious groups, and of course it doesn't matter if you give to churches. Well, there's something else probably though. We all have, and this is where we start to get into what's the theme of this episode. We have the life we previously led, and then the life that the word or spirituality or whatever truth you're following is calling you towards. This is a very incremental journey. It's not like maybe if you're super primed for it and you have some, really intense experience, you could make a huge leap and not look back much. But for most of us, this is a very gradual thing as we start to evolve into, I need a new way of thinking and living. We're always, there's part of the old life and part of the new life there together. And what this is about, this episode, what Swedenborg is finding here, is that the hell will use what was important to you in your old life to try to disrupt progress into the new life, to try to hold you back. And they'll do that through guilt. And they'll say, look at this, you're in this new thing, you think you're so great doing this, but you used to do this and now you don't, so that means you're a fraud. That is what is happening here. And how they do this? They stir up all the thoughts we previously held about this holy pious practice, and all the times we acted on the thought. The same in countless other cases, but these examples are only intended to shed some light. But this is just like, okay, for instance, to give you a little tangible thing, you got to figure out where this is showing up in your own life. But I feel like there's something very true about that. We do experience this on the back end where, I can't point to spirits and say, look, they're out there. But these feelings, like this does come up. Because look at this here. They stir up all the thoughts we previously held about this holy pious practice and all the times we acted on the thought. I do know that they'll be like, wait, remember who you are? Wasn't this who you are? And this is you're losing something of you. You're going against it, which of course is a charge that any of us are going to be like, oh no, because we naturally love who we are, but especially if we think it's like the good part of who we are. Or if it's just like, nah, man, like this like lovey-dove stuff, be nice to everyone, you're cool. Who you are is being cool, right? Who you are is being withdrawn and combative, whatever it is. This is who you are. You remember back when you were ambitious and about yourself, whatever it is that was in your old life that is in your new life, but it's not front and center. Hell can use that to say, wait, come on back. And I don't know, I'm just throwing this, as I say, throwing spaghetti, and to see if it sticks for you, because it's just going to sound like words until you get this feeling of, oh, I remember, I know an instance of that. So for me, I can remember these instances of like, oh yeah, definitely one of the greatest sort of anchors on my impulse to soar out into the life that these spiritual concepts are calling me towards is this like, but wait, remember this? Or here's this feeling, you're leaving this, you're losing this, something like that. Okay, so just so you know, hell does that. Most of all, what does hell do? Most of all, they infiltrate the feelings we used to have and stir them up. And okay, I'll finish the sentence, but you know I want to talk about that. And also anything false or bad we had thought or done. And isn't this classic, like, I thought I was making progress, and now I'm back in resentment, and now I'm back in anger. I felt like I was making good progress towards trusting divine providence, and then there's like a global pandemic, and now I'm just back in worry and concern, and I don't really get a good feeling that there's a divine plan over everything, because hell can use those feelings and use that to kind of keep us backslid. In this way, what's the point? In this way, they cause us to worry and often doubt, even to the point of despair. Terrible, but it's a process. This then is the source of spiritual distress and of the torture called pangs of conscience. They look to us as though they are inside us. Yeah, this is the thing I was describing earlier. They look to us as though they are inside us because of the way they flow in and are communicated. So when I don't think anyone really faults me for, this is not a particularly lovely rendition, but for showing the mind in terms of negative dark clouds affecting us and sunny, loving heaven things affecting us, right? But really, we experience that all as in the mind, right? We just feel like bright things here and dark things here, and they just seem like it's inside of us. And here Swedenborg goes on to describe what was sort of the fundamental revelation. People who know and believe these things they look to us as though they're inside us because of the way they flow in and are communicated. So they're not inside us. They're flowing in. Just like the example he often gives is, if you didn't really understand the physical world, you could well think that, and weren't used to moving around in distance, you had been sitting in a chair and never moved your whole life, you could well think that all the things you see are occurring inside you, all the things you hear. You just know that, that's how something far away sounds. So it is with what we feel in the heart and mind. Because of the way they flow in and are communicated, people who know and believe these things can be compared to those who see themselves in a mirror and realize that what appears in the mirror or on the other side of it is not themselves, but only their reflection. People who do not know or believe it can be compared to people who see themselves in a mirror and imagine that they themselves, rather than their reflection, are what appears there. So the stuff, the mess and the tangle, I just deleted the mess and tangle. The mess and the tangle, right, that's coming in. This whole mess of negative thoughts and feelings that bind us up day to day, right? We make the mistake of looking at this and saying that's us. Just like if you looked in a mirror and thought, look I'm over there, I'm in that wall. But this is actually not us. This is just as depicted here. This is just weather. And if we get out from under this, that's when we can really start to be us. Maya, right? People who, I read that. Here is why being put into the prison house, this is from the Bible. He's explaining this. We're in the midst of an explanation. And to say, why in the Bible do you have all this stuff about being put in prison? Well, it's describing the states that we all go through as a part of the process of spiritual growth. And held prisoner there means being subjected to trials involving lies that attack what is good. That's when you're in prison. When there are afflicting you lies that attack what is good. Prison house is the term for every place just under this. Okay, this is the weirdness that we wanted. This is what we've been looking for. Prison house is the term for every place just under the sole of the foot and thereabouts where people being devastated or purged are held. I don't have time for it now, but you've seen it every other episode. Every spiritual state we can be in has a correspondence to the shape of the body. So a certain, anyway, Right. Okay. These are people with, just leave a comment if you want more information about that. These are people with false assumptions who have lived a bad life on the basis of that falsity. Okay, so what do we got when we're in, and we say these are people, you might be thinking of someone else, but I think there are areas of all of us where we are in this state. So what do you got there? You got false assumptions. Okay. You got living a bad life on the basis of that falsity. Okay. But nonetheless have had good intentions. So this is where we are misguided. So it's not that we're evil, meaning evil is the intentional enjoyment of harming others, right? That's evil. But we got led astray somehow, and from that has led to actions that are harmful, right? So if we're in that state, how do we get out of it and get into heaven where everything is goodness and truth? They cannot go to heaven until they have rid themselves of their false assumptions. Makes sense. You got to have, because heaven is a state of mind. So if you have those dark clouds in there, they're necessarily blocking the sun, because that's what clouds do. They cannot go to heaven until they have rid themselves of their false assumptions, along with the pleasure they took in a life based on those assumptions. And that's insightful, because yeah, you can be believing the wrong things, but the only way you're really caught up in the web of those is if that false belief system, actually you enjoy it to an extent. But the reason you can be pried out of it is that you don't at heart despise your fellow human beings, right? So this part of us, or when we're in this state, or whoever, we don't despise our fellow human beings, right? So even though we've gotten, because we think, oh, this is actually a good way to act, but it's not a good way to act. Like before, when I was talking about this, looking for evil in other people and trying to condemn them for it. That, I think, could be a state like this. Let's say that we actually think, because we've been taught that what is really good to do is look for evil in people and condemn them for it, either in yourself or you go tell them they're being evil. And let's say in the way that is not constructive. Right. And we had this whole thing earlier about Swedenborg's awakening, and that, yeah, sometimes with certain people, they need to be confronted about stuff. But we all know the other side of it, this judgmental sort of gossipy, just looking for the delight of condemning people. Let's say that we had been taught that actually that's good. That's a good thing to do. And taught maybe by religion, maybe by our family, maybe wherever, that we think that's good. So we think we're doing good, and we get caught up then in the pleasure of feeling superior. But at the core of it, at the root of it, it's not that we really hate people, it's that we are in a deeper level really wanting to do what's good. So we're salvageable. What we can do though is we have to learn that it's not good to do that kind of judgment. And we have to, through a process, be rid of the pleasure of criticizing people like that. Because all pleasures, this is like think about when you try to cut out certain foods and your body starts to have cravings for them. You try to cut sugar or something. Not that I've ever really cut sugar, but you have these cravings for it. This is why it's not just like, all right, come on into heaven, because heaven is the opposite of that. Heaven is total understanding. I was just reading. I know you're like, when is he ever going to get back to the text? I'm never going to get back. I'm just going to talk forever. I was just reading a near-death experience where there was this description of, I think it was Jeff Olson, who we're going to have on this channel coming up, where he was describing walking by people and totally getting where they were coming from, like understanding why they were like they were, what their motives were, what the causes in their life that led them to be like they are, and just feeling this total love for them. And these other near-death experiences I was reading where they said, God knew every unlovable thing about me and still loved me. Doesn't mean enabling, doesn't mean giving us things that'll lead to us harming ourselves and others, but at the core of it, it's this love. That's what heaven is. So if you have the opposite of that, which is this joy in criticizing people, and you're really not thinking about their welfare, you're just thinking, I checked that box and I feel good, that is the opposite of heaven. So it's got to go. The pleasure in it has to go before we can, that space in us that's accepting that pleasure is all blocked off. We have to clear it out before that pleasure can come in. The people there are subjected to trials because false premises and pleasures rooted in a life based on them cannot be removed by any other means. How do you stop loving something? You got to hit bottom with it. You got to have bad experiences while you're in it. That's the only reason why bad experiences are allowed to happen, is it frees us from that kind of stuff. The place where these people are, or rather the state in which they are, is symbolized in general by a prison house, and such places themselves by pits. If this is all clear as mud on the process of devastation in the other life, see all these numbers in Secrets of Heaven. People undergoing devastation are called prisoners. Not that they are bound by any chains, here we go, but that they have no freedom in regard to their previous thoughts and the resulting emotions. So we can be in a prison where either we can't get free of our previous thoughts and the resulting emotions. Look at me, I'm spiritual, I thought I was past this, or I'm turning over a new leaf, but you just, as soon as hell sneaks in there and says, this is who you are, or who do you think you are, trying to change there, or just bringing it up and pulling you back into that negativity. This is what it is to be in prison. And I love the spin on it. The particular spin for today is this idea that, you're not free in regard to your previous thoughts and feelings, that those things can come in and be holding you back, but just know this is part of the way we get freed by them. Those things, because even if we think, okay, I've learned this new thing, I've turned over this new leaf, I'm out of here, I'm going, well, those pleasures are still in there. The pleasures of the old life, the pleasures of reputation and ego, whatever yours are, they're still there. And the good news is we've made the commitment to get out of them, so we will. God will do that, but it takes work. It takes these sorts of trials. And so we can't just never touch those feelings again. They come back. We have to really understand the problems they cause. We have these, I just want to, eventually, it's like, just now it's occurring to me, the story of the children of Israel. You guys know that, right? They're sitting there in Egypt, and there's a Pharaoh in Egypt who, by the way, Pharaoh represents in us sort of the old, he represents a lot of things, but essentially the falsity that keeps us in the old will. And that, there's a part of us, the children of Israel, that want to get out and go free. And initially they said, let us go free. And Pharaoh's like, okay, we'll go free. So it's like, we're going to go into this new life. But then as soon as they leave, Pharaoh's like, no, bring them back. This like, wait a second, we had it good before, bring them back. And then what has to happen? All these plagues hit, right? All the plagues hit. So that all of Egypt feels this, which again, no, we're not talking about country and people, we're talking about what's going on in us, feels this, what the damage of trying to keep this stuff back is. And only after all that stuff does it finally like, okay, they can go. And even that last time, Pharaoh chases after him, but the water hits him. So it's really this process of, we have to get through, we have to go through these cycles in order to really divest ourselves, really to not even say, man, I wish I could still, just to really get the full experience of, no, that's out, because there's something bigger and better and brighter coming up here. And that's the news from heaven. So if you're going through something, it's probably part of a good process. Even if it feels like you're in prison now, you won't always be. And I now release you from the prison of this episode. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hope that goes and does something good in your life. I hope you have the best day of your life tomorrow, and then the even better one the next day, and so on and so on. Although there may be these little things to work through on the way. Doesn't mean it's not all good. Thanks for hanging out.